Hi there, this is my channel, Yaru Walks. In the year 2024, I will embark on an epic walking journey across the United States. I plan to hike 8,000 miles and to cross the US 3 times, via the Appalachian Trail, Pacific Crest Trail, and Continental Divide Trail. In the hiking world, this is known as a calendar year Triple Crown and has been completed by only a handful of hikers in history. The calendar year Triple Crown has traditionally been completed by jumping within or between the trails throughout the year, primarily to avoid snow, but also to avoid other seasonal hazards such as floods, extreme desert heat, and wildfires. For my attempt, I'm trying to hike each trail on a continuous, unbroken, end-to-end footpath, and to accomplish this, I must hike across all 4 seasons. I will be posting weekly updates along the way, so you can join me for the journey. Wish me luck.
If you look straight ahead, the terrain looks fine, haze-wise. And if you look off to the left, it looks fine too, until you realize there are these large mountains over there, or foothills, that are barely visible through the smoke. The camera actually captures the peaks much more clearly than I'm able to see with my eyes. So still dealing with the smoke today, although it's better than it was yesterday, towards the end of the day. Yeah, and I'm not out of the fire zone yet. I'm now in an area that doesn't have an evacuation warning, but my concern is monitoring the first 5-day growth rate of the fire north. It moved 50 miles north in 5 days. That's moving 10 miles a day. And then the fire, I don't even know, it's something like 25-ish miles back that way. And so I'm running kind of like parallel to the path of the fire. So if this is the path of the fire over here, I'm ahead of it now up here, but I'm running parallel to it. So if that fire keeps growing and the winds pick up and it starts moving 10 miles a day again, it could move 50 miles, in the next 5 days. And the concern I have is that this trail goes straight for like another 45 miles and then it turns off this way for about 50 to 75 miles. And so in my mind, that fire is coming up this way and I'm turning into the, oncoming traffic this way. So the fire could come and catch me from behind. So I'm still monitoring the fire closely. And when I'm monitoring the fire, yeah, the evacuation warnings I would heed if they got out ahead of what decision I would make. But I think to hike a detour around a fire, you shouldn't be relying upon some governmental evacuation warning or order. You should be monitoring the exact location of the fire, understanding that you're on foot and at points you're more exposed because you do or do not have convenient bailout options. And so, again, to kind of push back against potential criticism I could receive, that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm getting daily satellite message updates on exact fire parameters. Anytime I get signal, I'm personally investigating the fire path, and I'm anticipating where the fire could grow and how quickly it could grow, even though it's not there. And my whole way through, I'm aware of the nearest roads, bailout options, and access points to towns, which towns are already closed down, which would then mean okay, I'll be traveling out on foot most likely. And so I'm just explaining, just like when I forded the Kennebec, just the safeguards I have in place, which include going above and beyond just listening to what the government's telling me, and extend into making my own forecasts for the fire, worst case scenarios, and planning my on-foot bailout options and making sure that I'm always far enough from the fire that I'm fast enough on foot to get away from it. So it's absolutely possible somebody could do this kind of a detour in a way that's reckless and endangering themselves and their potential rescuers if it came to that. And if someone told me they were doing a detour and it's fine, the evacuation orders aren't affecting the areas that I'm in, I would consider that person an idiot. I think you need to be watching not just the evacuation orders, but you need to be watching the exact fire. You need to know how quickly it's been growing over the last week, day by day, how many miles per day it's been growing, north, east, west, south, all of those things. You don't need to just you're not finished with your plan once you've found a walkable detour. You need to know your walkable detour and every bailout option off that detour. So I'm just distinguishing between what it is that I'm actually doing and what other people who might be lacking in information are perceiving and judging falsely as to what I'm doing. At the same time, I understand to some extent why people rush to those kind of judgments, because I would imagine most people who would be hiking a detour would not be monitoring the fire to the extent that I am. As I've said many times throughout this hike, there's a big difference between taking kind of uncalculated risks and taking highly calculated, planned out risks. And those are the risks that I take and have taken so far. Going up Katahdin, going through the Whites, hiking around this fire, so on and so forth. And I'm sure there will be more down the line. See that haze low on the horizon? That's the smoke. It's kind of shifted north again. I can definitely smell the smoke in the air again, but it's more of like something more like a thick version of what you would smell walking down a neighborhood road in winter. Smelling chimney smoke from a house. I guess the difference is you're not like walking through the waft of smell. It's just kind of everywhere. But it's not so thick that it's like nauseating like it was back in south of Chester. So definitely working my way, generally speaking, out of the smoke zone. I'm just hiking along and I look over and I see randomly what looks like a 14er. I have no idea what that mountain is. How interesting are these trees? Big winds today up here on the ridge. If winds like this are present further to the south, then there's a good chance that the park fire is going to have some tremendous growth today. If winds, the winds that are blowing on me now, if those same winds are blowing on the park fire, I would imagine we'd have a doubling of that fire today in size. So typically you have high winds though when you come up over these ridges because the air rushes to come up. So hopefully what I'm experiencing up here is not in any way chances of what's happening further south, but this is the first time I've really felt major wind in over a week. And the last time I felt major wind was during the first few days of the park fire was growing. This is pretty awful. I'm wearing shorts, so the bushes just scrape on my legs in the same place over and over. It's funny too, I've noticed when I complain about features of the trail, I get people who push back. And I think the core issue is that I'm complaining at all. It's subconscious. I think that people don't even realize it, but it's like what they're objecting to is that I'm complaining. Like I complain about how blowdowns are miserable, and objectively blowdowns are incredibly miserable, especially if you have tighter joints. But complaining that a blowdown is miserable is not equivalent to saying this experience is awful. It's also not fair to draw a line to say that because I'm complaining about a blowdown that all day, if you could have the camera on me out here all day running, that I'm just complaining and moaning. But as a way to kind of like poke me in the eye back, I got some comments along the line of well, if you think these blowdowns are bad, just you wait for Oregon. Ooh, wait for Washington. And I'm like, yeah, the blowdowns are annoying, but it's not like hiking the PCT during its optimal weather window in Oregon is going to pose serious challenges to me. Like, the things I'm actually concerned about are fires literally knocking the trail out, and extreme cold that could kill you, and snow so high that it could like slough off into an avalanche. Knockdown trees are annoying. They're very annoying. But they're not the kind of things that could derail a calendar year Triple Crown. So, anyway, that's my piece. I think part of the reason I'm on that topic today is because there have been, just a large number of blowdowns. But even still, nothing the PCT has shown me comes anywhere near close to how challenging the blowdowns were on the AT, especially in Maine, where like there was like a once in a century flood that came through last December, strangely, and it knocked down all these trees and it left all these areas still flooded as I was hiking through in Maine and battling those blowdowns. I mean, it was just unbelievable. Yeah, there were sections where the trees had fallen down in line with the trail, 2 or 3 trees in a row, where you can't go off the trail because the thicket is too dense. And then to stay on the trail, progress was like, I don't know, maybe like, if it was a 100-meter long section, it took maybe 25 minutes to get all the way through it. It might have taken like 35 or 40, just because you sometimes doubt the route you're taking and you backtrack, and then you realize, no, actually, yeah, as awful as it is, it's impossible to go off to the side, because off to the side there were even more trees at 90-degree angles that had fallen down out into the thicket. So the best path forward was along the tree logs. So anyway, I just think it's funny, the constituency of people who react negatively, specifically if someone complains while filming, as if like, you know, if we just reduce it to the PCT, on a 2,650 mile journey through the desert, the High Sierra, Northern California wildfires, Oregon and Washington wildfires, that you're going to go through all that and not complain. Because the place from which that type of a comment is sourced, it's like if you're like an expert in some field, and then like I would imagine like those stolen valor officers, you know, like you see them on YouTube, these guys that pretend that they were like in the Iraq War, and they have all these medallions on their shirts, and then they speak in like buzzword lingo. It just sticks out like a sore thumb. I'm just thinking that's my best way to relate how those comments sound to me as someone who's actually through hiking. Like that's how absurd it sounds for someone to say like, oh, I'm doubting your ability to succeed at this based on the fact that you're complaining about blowdowns as you're navigating up the borderline closed off section of non-existent trail as you bushwhack your way up Mission Creek. That the section that half of the people on this trail skip, that you're complaining as you're actually navigating that section, sounds so tone deaf to a thru hiker. Alrighty, I'm maybe in the process of leaving the town of Dunsmuir now. My backpack has a 6-day food carry load. Getting off the trail yesterday, I felt nauseous. I had a headache coming into town. I was stopping a lot on trail. And then the shuttle driver who gave me a ride into town told me that the person who was actually behind me on trail, from what I could gather, skipped ahead to get off the trail. I think she said it because it was too hot and too smoky. And then the person ahead of me on trail was, I guess, vomiting and collapsing, they think from norovirus. And in the app that we use, I had read about a number of people complaining about maybe getting norovirus on the trail. These factors led me to be concerned that maybe I don't have heat exhaustion, maybe I have norovirus, because the early symptoms that I was experiencing felt very similar to when I had Giardia. More or less like, I think I first noticed that I had it in Duncannon, and I had a pretty severe headache, and kind of like when people were talking to me, an inability to listen carefully or closely. It just felt like almost like more exhausting than walking. And that's how I felt coming into this town today, yesterday. So I figured I would wake up this morning, and if I still felt sick, that would indicate that it wasn't heat exhaustion, that it was would actually then possibly be norovirus, but I woke up and I felt fine. And then I decided I would just go back out later this afternoon. I've decided the heat, which has been 100 degrees Fahrenheit, has been so just boring down into my brain in the last 3 days that it's basically not hikeable from 1 to like 4 p.m. for me at least. August 12th, 8:30 a.m. Alrighty. After 5 days of being sick with what I think was norovirus, it was either noro or Giardia, is my best guess. I am back on trail. I actually took off yesterday from Dunsmuir, hiked up trail like 10 miles last night, and am now like 6 miles into my day this morning. Yeah, I'm probably too tired to even film right now. I'm kind of dealing with like lingering exhaustion from being sick, and I'm walking up a hill. but I'm definitely on the upswing from the sickness, so that's the good news. And then I'm also, though, dealing with just lingering exhaustion from my body being weaker, which I was walking just fine 30 seconds ago, and now I feel exhausted because I'm holding this phone up, so I'm going to put it away. All right, so this is kind of funny. I hiked in from somewhere back there, Dunsmuir. I'm off to the right now. That's all smoke. So, I don't know, I'm living a day at a time, but there's been the Shelley fire. There's the Shelley fire, which has been burning for, I don't know, a month or more on the trail up here. So, I'm about to enter into a new fire zone, the Shelley fire. So, that's coming up in about, I don't know, 1 to 2 days. Okay, another update for today. I'm definitely starting to smell smoke from the Shelley fire ahead. The Shelley fire started, I don't know when, a month or more ago, and it was closed, so it burned over, or at least near to the trail. I'm not sure if it burned over the trail, but that section of the trail was closed, but the closure order expired like, I don't know, 4 or 5 days ago. So I'm able to hike through that section now, through the nearest town is Etna. So the hikers refer to it as like the Etna closure or the Shelley fire. So I'll hit that in like maybe 30 miles or 40 miles, I don't really know. But I'm now starting to hit the smoke from that fire. So I know from experience, when they open these burn sections up, it doesn't mean that the fire is totally extinguished. It means that it's kind of in a controlled smoldering state. So I'm expecting the smoke to be pretty bad coming into the Shelley fire reopening. And so, but the reason that I'm recording now is just to note, because I'm truly mystified, that so it's been 260 trail miles, and I have hiked about 260 miles since the original closure for the park fire back in Quincy, where I had to do my bushwhack. And I thought that when I arrived at Old Station, which would be 160 miles ago, or 100 miles from where I had to get off trail because of the trail closure, that as soon as I got to Old Station, I would run into like some hikers, who were kind of more purist and insistent. And I'm assuming those would be hikers who were bussing around the closure and rejoining the trail in Old Station. But to my kind of surprise, when I met those firefighters who had been out there for 10 days, they said, no, we saw one woman come through like a few days ago, but other than that, we haven't seen anybody out here. And then, as you recall, squirrel bait comes walking up as I'm literally talking to those firefighters. So, and he was the last hiker who I was hiking with on trail. So he asked me what my plan was, and I said, I'm going to hike around the fire. Next thing I know, when I'm halfway through my detour, he sends me a message saying he's doing his own detour. So, as far as I knew at that time, the only other hiker doing a detour was squirrel bait. But I lost contact with him basically once we were doing the detours because there wasn't consistent cell signal. So I really had no idea when he would be arriving back on trail or even what exact route he was taking. And so that was a total coincidence that he arrived within like minutes of me arriving back on trail. The odds of that are, to me, still seem crazy. And that I was filming when I saw him, which is funny. But the key point here is the only other hiker that I knew of doing that detour was squirrel bait. And then I could see in the logbook, there was another hiker whose name I've already forgotten, but and squirrel bait knew of her. And so the three of us did the detour as far as I'm aware. Those are the only three people who I'm aware who did their own like kind of improvised detour around the park fire. And so I thought when rejoining, so if this is the park fire over here, and since then it's actually burned over the PCT, The detour that I did went off like this, straight off to the right, down into a canyon along some train tracks, and then forward up into a mountain that was just a few miles from the PCT, and then went forward all the way until the town of Chester. They closed the national park, so then I did a new kind of detour off and around the national park in that really hot section where it was hard to find water, and I rejoined at Old Station. And my detour was something like 95 miles, and the length of the trail that was closed was something like 100 miles. And so, and my detour was much harder than, you know, whatever the trail conditions would have been in terms of hiking, and every bit as smoky in terms of smoke. So all things considered, my detour was harder than what the PCT route would have been, and it was every bit as exposed to the fire and the smoke. I just didn't want to hike on the trail because I didn't want to set a nasty precedent. If someone was like in the future trying to do a continuous footpath, I was like, okay, well, this guy claims to have done it, but he hiked through a closed fire section. It just, I don't know. I don't honestly see a problem with doing it because I knew that I could have done it in a manner that would have been safe. And I was pretty sure I could make it through without having to bail out, like off a bailout route. But like in my gut, it just felt wrong for reasons that I can't even really fully articulate. So anyway, I did my detour, and again, I'm trying to get to the point of this video. So I rejoined an Old Station, and that's 100 miles long detour and closure of the trail. I figured, okay, in Old Station, that's where I would meet the hikers who shuttled around the fire and rejoined. They're like, okay, they're kind of annoyed that the trail got closed, and now they're back on the trail. Except that never happened. I never met a hiker in that section, except for one hiker, one hiker named Easy Bake, who I met there. I'm sick for 5 days, but I'm thinking like, oh, surely I'll meet a lot of hikers in this area. I never saw a hiker in the hotel area that I was at. And when I was in town, I think I saw one other hiker walking around in the time that I was in town. And so I get back on trail thinking, okay, well, there'll be a bunch of hikers that I'll meet, you know, once I'm back on trail after Dunsmuir. And so now I'm, I don't know, 30 miles or 25 miles from Dunsmuir on the trail, and I've only met 2 other hikers so far, Hoot Owl and Summit, who I hiked with yesterday and a little bit so far today. And they are every bit as shocked as I am that we haven't met anybody in this section of the trail, which is strongly indicating that, because there's really no re-entry point, no logical entry point onto the trail from here all the way to Syad. Syad is in like 140 miles. So what that means is if that's 150 and I've come, like, let me do the math. I'm going to pause and do the math real quick. The thing that I'm emphasizing here, I'm not surprised that half of the people are skipping to Oregon. Shit, honestly, I am surprised. Like, if they were skipping to Dunsmuir, I would say that I wasn't surprised, but they're not. They're skipping all the way to Oregon. And so let me just make my very simple point. The thing that floors me is that you know, I would have figured that 50% of the hikers would have been like, look, I hiked a continuous footpath this whole way. The trail reopens at Old Station, and short of smoke, you know, there's no reason I can't hike this section. So I would think that, I don't know, 20% of the hikers would have rejoined at Old Station. And then I figured that maybe 70% of the hikers would have rejoined at Dunsmuir. And then maybe like 30% would have rejoined in Oregon. Like a bell curve of like the nutsos who rejoined at Old Station is a small cohort. The middle of the bell curve is Dunsmuir, where there's no longer any issues. And then the back end of the bell curve would have been Oregon. The people who are hyper conscious about smoke, or they have asthma issues or whatever, like there are legitimate reasons to skip. I'm not judging, you know, wholesale. But no, the reality is that something like, from what I'm deducing here, something like 97% of the hikers skipped 400 to 500 miles of this trail. because the numbers should be 40 to 50 hikers per day on trail in this section. I think that's a reasonable estimate for the number of hikers on trail, because I'm bumping into maybe like 15 to 20 per day. So if I'm bumping into 15 to 20 before the fire, then that there should be double to almost triple the number of hikers in a given 30-mile section of the trail. I think that's a ballpark estimate. So the fact that I didn't see anybody rejoining in Dunsmuir before I was sick, and I basically didn't see anybody rejoining after I was sick, indicates that nearly everybody is jumping all the way to Syad Valley or Oregon. But my guess now is Syad Valley. But I've had to keep bumping further and further forward where I think people are rejoining. Because I never would have guessed that people would skip 420 miles of the trail. Or at least, again, I'm trying to make my point. The thing that floors me, it's not that some people would skip, and it's not even that half the people would skip all the way to Oregon. It's that virtually everybody skipped all the way to Oregon. I don't know. Yeah, it's just like again, if some people decide to skip Oregon, okay, fair enough, but that seemingly everybody skipped all the way to Oregon. Just, I don't know. It's a fascinating observation, because I don't have the data to support this, but I really do not think that if you're hiking the AT, that if something like a fire like this had broken out, that 95% of AT hikers would skip 400 miles ahead. I think that at least 20% would rejoin the trail ahead as soon as they could. And so what I'm observing here is just the shocking contrast between, let me not even emphasize the contrast between the PCT and the AT, but I'm just shocked that everybody has skipped 400 miles. You can see, I mean, look, this is what the trails look like. I've been filming, you've been watching with me. And anybody who drove in a car could get out of the car and see for themselves. There's nothing wrong with this trail. And there hasn't been anything wrong with the trail since Old Station, which was over 150 miles ago. Quick documentation of how the smoke is thickening. That's Mount Shasta. I don't know, maybe 10 miles away, 8 miles away. And it's barely visible through the haze. That should be visible from 20 miles away, maybe 30 miles away. And then I'll walk over here. So these are the trees on the ridge that I'm hiking. I just came over that pass right there. I mean, not even half an hour ago, maybe 20 minutes ago. So watch how quickly the visibility deteriorates. And it's gone. So I started eating these, we're going to show the brand, Planters Mixed Nuts, salted. And without looking, typically there's kind of two kinds of people who eat these kind of snacks. The people who target their favorite thing, and then the people who just grab a handful out. At times I'm both, but I swear to God, I just put my hand in here twice and just scraped off the top. And then when I looked in, I noticed, I don't really see any cashews in here, which is strange, because really all I see are peanuts and almonds, and mostly peanuts. And so presumably the peanuts are the least expensive. And I think everyone knows that off the bat. Peanuts tend to be the cheapest nut at the grocery store. You can see one lonely Brazil nut over there on the left. but it's pretty much peanuts and almonds. And so it really does feel like the world has changed since 2020, where I don't know, the quality of products and especially customer service have just declined. It was some kind of transition that happened in 2020 where I guess people just started putting up with more BS, and companies realized that people were willing to do that and that it was in their interest to, and it always has been, maximize the net present value of the shareholders of the corporation that creates whatever these products are or services. And so I'm sure someone at Planters asked, why on earth are we putting the expensive nuts in there in like a higher proportion than we need to? And so, one form of shrinkflation or inflation we know is shrinkflation, where things are smaller. But another form is where when you have variety, whatever the most expensive component of that variety is reduced in number. And so, like, when they sell you these nuts, it's in a jar that does not allow you to look inside, right? And so all of our life, we've just opened this jar, and then there's always been roughly the same ratio of nuts in it. I'm pretty sure that the number of Brazil nuts, walnuts, and cashews has been reduced in these jars. And what I think is fun, and I already did this experiment, but I just looked on the top and I said, okay, whichever nuts are the least present in here, I suspect are the nuts that are most expensive. But I bet that they'll be emphasized on the packaging. So let's turn and come over here. Okay. So we have Planters salted mixed nuts. Let's look at what it looks like according to the packaging. So there's one cashew right there, another cashew behind that cashew, I think, a cashew back there. Then you see like, oh yeah, just 4 peanuts, and then tons and tons and tons of almonds. And because they know that they're largely fronting, at least they're honest and showing only 1 walnut and only, did they even show, I think that's a Brazil nut there on the left, which is why it's got like the white part showing. So let's come back and look again. Okay. So there's like a shattered 1/8 of a walnut on top, and there is a Brazil nut over there on the left. There are no cashews visible other than there's one right there. Like, I'm going to try and get close to it. That's it right there between those 3 almonds. Otherwise, it's all peanuts. So, I don't know. Welcome to the post-2020 world where mixed nuts means pretty much entirely peanuts and almonds. Super annoying. Alrighty, I am hiking right now with Hoot Owl behind me. And then his girlfriend is ahead, Summit. She's faster than us today. But they are the only 2 hikers I have met since leaving Dunsmuir. And we think we're maybe 3 of like 10 people, at least I think, up to Syad. So shout out to them for sticking it out and hiking the hard, smoky section. But anyway, so we've been chatting today, and he was telling me these stories that I think are awesome, and I think it'd be fun just to share with people. So first off, you guys did a detour where you got off of the PCT and you had to go to Arizona. Do you mind sharing just kind of the story of like what was going on there?
Yeah, absolutely. So that just kind of stems from a previous through hike where I met a family hiking with a mother with her 4 boys who were then 11 through 15, and just kind of blew my mind that kids so young were doing the same thing that I was doing. And I think we all kind of have, a little chip on our shoulder, a bit of pride about coming out here and tackling such a big thing. But at such a young age, it was a whole new level of appreciation I had for them. And time goes forward, we find out that this family goes on to Triple Crown, and I stayed in touch with them. They also did the Arizona Trail, and that led to them entering a 250-mile run called the Cocodona.
Which is one of the hardest ultra marathons in the entire United States. It might actually be the hardest ultra marathon, just to add to it. Okay.
So you have
Yeah.
a desert environment, and it's very dry. And their mother, who had been their teacher through the years, they're all homeschooled by her. Her trail name was Mrs. Frizzle. That might resonate with certain age groups. She didn't love it at first, but it was the most fitting name anybody could ever have given her. She messages me and says, I know you and Summit now are going out to do the PCT. Would you be able to help us with something? I said, yeah, sure thing. He said, well, it might involve a little bit of time. So we actually went out and we paced them and got off trail for 9 days to assist them in running and pacing them in this 250-mile event. And it just never ceases to amaze me, the people you meet out here. I mean, night shift is one of them, you know. There are so many people just doing all kinds of different incredible things and coming from all different walks of life. It's just, you never know who you're going to run into, and they're just out here in the middle of the woods.
Could you tell the story? So I think it was on Cocodona where you're pacing one of them, and I don't know what mile you're at, but I guess you meet some lady that gives you guys a funny look, or I can't remember exactly how it went, but.
So this is while I was running with the 18 years old. At that time, we're running in the Cocodona, and it happened to be over a section of trail that overlaps the Arizona Trail. So you encounter a couple more day hikers, some of which don't even know that they're on a national scenic trail sometimes. So they might not be familiar with, you know, these high level activities where people are testing themselves in a different kind of way. And it's quite an obscurity to them most of the time. So Ben, his trail name's Unbreakable, from his first through hike. We're going along, and everyone kind of develops a little limp along the way, and you know,
It's a 250-mile race.
Yeah. It's mentally and physically more taxing than anything I can conceive. I assisted with it, but I'm nowhere near that person myself. We're just kind of the cheerleaders to them, but they're incredible people. And so we're running along, and you know, he has kind of a jaded look, head down, and we're troogling along.
And he's limping hard, you're saying.
Yeah, and he's got a little bit of a limp, and I forget exactly how far. We're probably 150 miles in, something like that. This lady's just walking with a tiny little bag, you know, out for her 5, maybe 10-mile hike. And she looks at me as, you know, the older person, and she just says, you know, he okay? And Ben looks up to the lady and he says, 250-mile run. And the look on this lady's face was priceless, because she just realized that she is not challenging herself in those same ways. And she may never want to, and that's perfectly acceptable. But just the concept that there are these people out there that are doing these ludicrous things, you know, which, you know, a lot of thru hikers have such an appreciation for.
What she sees as a boy limping, who she presumes has some man relationship unknown, seemingly seeing this happen and allowing it to continue. But what she doesn't recognize she's seeing is the heart of a champion at the age 18. which could exist in an 11-year-old, because I think you said that the youngest of the family was 11. Is that right today? And then the entire family, if I listened correctly, has triple crowned.
Yes.
Is that right? Yes,
they have.
So, and I think most people know what that means, but they have hiked the Appalachian Trail, the Pacific Crest Trail, the Continental Divide Trail.
Okay, so Ben, when I first met him, well, I really met them as a group, but when I first met the group, it was my first day back. I was finishing up my mileage from 2020, and the kid had a little limp. And, if we're out here to do this through hike, I mean, you're kind of in or you're out, in my opinion. You're not gonna quit your job to go off to do this grandiose thing and not give it your all. So in a way, anybody that's been involved in sports can appreciate the adage, if you're not limping, you're not trying. And, it kind of comes with the nature of the game. And adults, everybody out here, we encounter tons of pain all the time. So this kid's limping along. He's in the back of the pack. He's the oldest one. And, I always thought there has to be some level where, you want to keep up with your brothers. It's got to be so incredibly tough. But
Because he has 3 other brothers, or
3 other brothers.
so it's 4 brothers in the family.
So he's the most senior. He has to, in the way, be an example to them. And, he's, I would absolutely be remiss to not say that Ben is the calmest of the bunch, the quietest of the bunch. Anybody who knows the field trip would be able to notice that right away. But we're getting to know these kids, and we get to a hostel on the AT, and the police come, and we're all like shocked, like, what are they here for? What vigilante hiker, that is away from society is getting picked up. We find out the worst news of all, that they're here out of concern for the child, and they want to know what's going on with their mother. Why would she allow this to happen? Well, the reality is these kids are tough as nails, and they've already done things that most adults have not in their short life. So this goes on for some time, and it gets better, but it still continues. And the father had come out to visit, and he says to their mother, Ben's still limping, and I think we should really get this checked out and just make sure everything's going okay. He's not in severe pain, but there's something there. So they have an x-ray done of Ben's leg, and it turns out the doctor tells them, well, Ben actually broke his femur. And the doctor's befuddled from them telling me this story themselves. And it has healed incredibly well. These kids are hiking miles and miles, but they have the right mentality. They're not negative. The first thing I tell people about them is that they don't complain. They don't even pick on each other as brothers.
They're like the most mature, kids you've met, is what you're saying.
And that comes through the process of doing things that are incredibly challenging. It gives you that life experience. So they are incredibly mature, more mature than many adults that I've met in my life. So it goes on for a couple more days where I'm hiking along with them, and Ben's able to do incredible mileage, still more than completely healthy people. And I said, you know what? I found out a trail name for you. Your trail name should be Unbreakable. And so that's what he's stuck with.
I love that story, and you're the one who named him.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, it couldn't be a better fitting name, because he, amongst his brothers and mother, are some of the most persistent people I've met on trail. Just tenacious people. Their father couldn't be more kind. He's at home working as well, and just funding this dream for all of them. He was crew chief at Cocodona for all three of them when they ran in the event.
Such a great story. And you kind of like sidestepped into it briefly, but just the story of their hiking, and I guess one of the kids is like behind the bunch and limping into the station hostel, I think in Tennessee, and then someone calls Child Protective Services because they think that this kid's just been like left out in the wild to hike, you know, and then the police come. And then they come and talk to the kid. Kid's like, no, I want to be here. Like, you know, and then they explain like the mom is a teacher and she's literally homeschooling them like on the trail.
Right.
And they like, you got to imagine like all these brothers are, I don't know them personally, I'm just speaking, but like, you know, tough as nails. And they all want to be out there. And it would be crazy to force some kid to walk who doesn't want to be out there. That would actually be abusive and insane. But that's not the situation with these kids. They all want to be there, you know? And anyway.
Yeah, it's hard enough to get a kid to eat their vegetables.
Exactly. Oh man, such good stories though.